So the topic for today is the top 12 most valuable 10-inch records in my collection. Before we dive in, if you could go ahead and hit the subscribe button, I'd appreciate it. So the inspiration for today's video was actually another YouTuber. So I was watching Ryan, aka amanandhismusic, post about some, I think it was like best scores that he had ever had, like in his entire time collecting. And one of the records that he pulled out was a Billie Holiday 10-inch record. And I got to thinking about some of the 10-inch records that I had in my collection, including some Billie Holiday ones in particular, and started listening to some of them again because it had been a while. And I just got to thinking, like, you know, hey, maybe I should start focusing a little bit more on my 10-inch stuff. So I have a couple hundred 10-inch records. They don't get as much play as a lot of the a lot of the 12-inch stuff. I got to be honest. And I know that 10-inch records also have a reputation for not being as high quality, and I think that that isn't fair necessarily. So I guess a couple of things. One is that yes, there is more variability in quality with 10-inch records, especially depending on the label. But really the main problem that we have here is that 10-inch was a gap, or filled the gap between 78 RPM shellac discs and 12-inch records, right? So invariably what you had was people played 10-inch vinyl records on equipment that they probably shouldn't have. With the shift to 12-inch and vinyl, you had a lot of old equipment. You had styluses that were meant for shellac discs, and yeah, it just like wasn't ideal. And so a lot of the 10-inch records that you come across, they look like they're just completely beat. They've been played to hell. They've been, the tone arm is like weighted down on the record. And I think a lot of that is because of the lack of familiarity with folks who were buying this stuff at the time in terms of how they should play it. So just the equipment wasn't as good. So a lot of stuff you're going to come across is beat, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of the actual 10-inch disc is lesser, although you could also say that the recording techniques were not quite as sort of advanced or robust in that middle time period. And really we're talking about like 1950, maybe more likely 51, through about 1955, when the shift to 12-inch happened, and that kind of carried us through. So it really was a blip. There's not a whole lot of stuff on a 10-inch in terms of jazz. And so I personally think, I have, like I said, a couple hundred. I'm not really actively looking for more, unless there's some of these rare records like the one that Ryan showed, which is Billie Holiday at the Philharmonic, which I don't have. It's a live performance, and I know that it sounds good because I've heard it, and I'd love to find that at some point. All right, so we're going to do this from basically last to first. So let's start out with number 12. This may be an unfamiliar title to you, and that is Billie and Stan. So Billie Holiday and Stan Getz. This is on the Dale Records label. Dale Records did not put out much. I think that they're even lying in terms of the releases that they say on the back of this thing, because I don't think all of these were ever put out. So there's not very many titles. It's pretty obscure stuff. You can get some of it in 10-inch format. You can also get some 7-inch singles that came out of it. I think I have some of the Stan Getz ones in single format. But yeah, 1954. This is a really nice cover designed by Bert Goldblatt, who I'm a particular fan of. I've mentioned this in prior videos. This was recorded a mix of between 1951 and 1953. At Storyville in Boston. So this is live sessions that make up this. The lineup on this record, I personally don't entirely believe, because it was recorded across 3 sessions over several years. I don't think that they used the same lineup. But the lineup that is stated, at least on Discogs, if you can believe that, is John Fields on bass, Marcus Foster on drums, Buster Harding on piano, and of course Stan Getz on sax, and Billie Holiday on vocals. Really, really nice stuff. Again, 1954, the median Discogs value on this title is $237.48. So, I would say fairly valuable and fairly difficult to find in decent shape. Like I said before, this early stuff was played to death, and certainly anything Billie Holiday put out would have been in demand. I'm quite sure that they didn't put out many copies of this, however. I don't believe also that this has been this hasn't been reissued, at least in this format. I believe that these tracks have appeared on some other compilation later on, but I don't think that this has been reissued, at least in terms of this format, even expanded to say a 12-inch. So one other quick thing that I actually almost forgot that I thought I'd mention, just because I think it's interesting. So this was recorded in Boston, like I said, at Storyville. And the record label actually says recorded in France. And so the speculation, this is not my speculation, but the speculation that I've read is that they put recorded in France on the actual label to sort of divert attention away from the fact that, that I think these folks were like under contract, or maybe the session wasn't like sanctioned or something. I think essentially this is like bootleg stuff. Not that it was recorded by somebody else and reproduced here illegally, but just that they weren't allowed to put it out because I think these artists were under contract. And so that may actually speak to why it's difficult to suss out exactly who's on this record on exactly what track. And that is because they're trying to obscure it. So I will post just a quick close-up of this right over here so that you can see where it says recorded in France, but I do assure you it was not. All right, number 11. This one I'm a little embarrassed by, but also bewildered. So let me explain both. I'm embarrassed because I've been storing this record without a sort of an outer sleeve, and I always store records outside of the sleeve in a separate inner sleeve, like behind it, and then I put it in the outer sleeve. I'm one of those people. And I haven't done that with this. This has just been sitting in, in the shelves, probably haven't even cleaned it. I did take it out. I'm almost positive I haven't cleaned it. And yeah, it's just been sitting in there. And only when I was cataloging my collection in Discogs did I come across this thing and find out that for some reason, this title is worth a lot of money. So I'm bewildered because this is volume 3. Okay, so you can see it's listed here, Hollywood Jazz Session, volume 3. I also have volumes 1 and 2. Volumes 1 and 2 are not worth very much. I have no idea why volume 3 has a very high median Discogs value. So a little bit about this record, 1954, just like that Billie Holiday record. This is on the Savoy label. And the lineup here, you have Sonny Criss, misspelled. You have Al Killian, Barney Kessel, Russ Freeman, and Ken Kennedy. You also have Wardell Gray. So there's just one track on here. Part 1 is on one side, part 2 is on the other. So it is indeed a blowing session. Another great cover by Burt Goldblatt. I'm always going to mention that when it comes up, because I don't think this is the last one on this list. But here's the thing, is that the median value is $252.81. And I just have no idea why that would be the case. I got this for $1. And I'm pretty sure that if you come across this somewhere, you're probably going to find it for $1 too, or like $5 or something. I don't know why. I don't know why it has that value. I can't explain it. Is the music here so much better? No, it's not because of Wardell Gray. I know that he's, got some great stuff. But like I think he's on the other Hollywood Jam sessions, jazz sessions that are a part of the series, and they're not worth nearly as much. So I cannot explain it. I suppose scarcity is what dictates these things. And as soon as one sells for a lot of money, then theoretically more will sell for a lot of money. Don't know. Can't explain it. All right, number 10. This is by Charles Mingus, and it is called Strings and Keys. This is the very first release by Charles Mingus's Debut Records label. It's an interesting cover. It's kind of nondescript. It doesn't say Charles Mingus's name on it, nor does it say the piano player Spalding Given's name on it. Kind of has an interesting sort of illustration of the two playing on the back. So this is a duet. I think that if you might, potentially be able to come across this record and have somebody not give it much attention simply because the artist names are not written on the front. I think that the record covers became a little bit better for Debut. I mean, they were never stellar, but like they at least became better than this after the first release. But this was 1953, so pretty early. Like I said, the first one on Charles Mingus's sort of private label that he created, which was Debut. And median price on this is $255.88. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting stuff. I personally love Mingus. I know there's some folks who only like him in small doses. But for me, I personally love basically everything that he does. I love the ability to track his compositions over time as they kind of changed and evolved, and they changed names even, and they combined together. And I just find the evolution of his work to be really interesting to pay attention to. And, you know, you almost can't get earlier than this in terms of his work as a leader. So fascinating album, and yeah, number 10 on the list. All right, next one up, number 9. This is Betty St. Clair, Cool and Clearer for the Jubilee label. Not the last appearance by Jubilee as a label on this list, not the last appearance of Betty St. Clair. So another fantastic cover by Burt Goldblatt, right? You see this sort of iconic monochromatic, not monochromatic, right? Well, I guess if black is, if you call black a color. Anyway, you know, single tone, you know, otherwise black and white photo that sort of characterizes a lot of his work that he did for Bethlehem. This very much looks like a Bethlehem cover. So on this record, who do we have? We have Addison Farmer on bass, who is Art Farmer's twin brother. Herb Lavelle on drums, Barry Galbraith on guitar, and Eddie Swanson on piano. Betty St. Clair has just a fantastic tone. She chooses classic songs here as well. You have Old Black Magic to kind of open things up. Prelude to a Kiss, Skylark is on this. There's some good stuff. And yeah, so let's see, 1955 is when this title was put out. Median value, $256.58. I think a lot of people don't know Betty St. Clair. She had some work early on for Jubilee. I'm trying to remember what became of her. Possibly not much. So yeah, that's number 9. All right, number 8. This is John Eardley in Hollywood, and it is on the New Jazz label. So you may say, New Jazz, isn't that a label that Prestige launched in 1958 or so? They actually revived it. So New Jazz pre-existed. I don't want to say pre-existed Prestige. I think they came about at least on 10-inch around the same time. I think both were active in the 78 RPM sort of shellac era. But anyway, New Jazz was a separate company at the time, and yeah, they put out a number of 10 inches before quickly sort of becoming Prestige, and this was one. I personally think that the value of this is in large part derived from the fantastic cover. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't great music, but let's be honest, look at that cover. I know that people overvalue or value things higher because when they have great covers. You see this in Blue Note quite a bit, where, say, a record by an artist that has a particularly great cover goes for a lot more money than another record where there's better music on it that goes for less because it has a lesser cover. So anyway, I don't want to necessarily take anything away from the music because it is great, but look at that cover. Come on. So the lineup on this thing, you have Red Mitchell, you have Larry Bunker, Pete Serra, and then of course John Eardley on trumpet. So 1955, median value on this thing, $299.99. Number 7, and the first appearance of a Blue Note record on this list, and it is called The Cool Britons. Subheading New Sounds from Old England, and take a look at that cover. Really great illustration here. So a number of folks on here that I'm not that familiar with. A few of them I are, but you have Albert Hall on trumpet. You have someone who's being credited as King John I on alto sax. That is John Dankworth. You have Don Rendell on tenor sax, Harry Klein on baritone, Ralph Dollimore on piano, Johnny Hawksworth on bass, David Murray, and Alan Ganley on drums. So yeah, like I said, a Blue Note title, 1954, and kind of an interesting one because I think that a lot of these Brits who are on this record were very likely not familiar to the U.S. audience, and so at the same time that the U.S. musicians were going to Europe to play and became better known, there was a little bit of sort of reciprocity there with bringing some of the UK musicians to the U.S. So this particular title, median value $308.64, continues to become more and more collectible. I mean, it is scarce. I think a heavy amount of the desirability of this one happens to be the label, a little bit less so the music. Again, no slight against the music, but let's be real, Blue Note carries with it a lot of sort of cachet, if you will. All right, number 6. It's taken me this long to get to a trashed cover. How about that? So here we have How McKusick Plays, Betty St. Clair Sings. I mentioned that Jubilee and Betty St. Clair would be back, and here they are. Despite this trashed cover, that is a Burt Goldblatt image, and again, despite the cover and the fact that it's taped shut, it's a great image. It's really, really nice, actually. I love how he features the microphone that's sort of hanging from the ceiling, or probably from a boom, so prominently. It just has a really cool effect on these covers. So who do we have on this record? Let's see. We have I don't even know. It doesn't say. How about that? Doesn't even say who's on it. No idea. I actually did a little bit of research and I couldn't find it either. So Jubilee record though, and from 1955, median value on this is $324.50. This thing is just impossible. It's impossible to find. You just can't get it. And I'm not saying that to like, as like a bragging kind of thing. I'd been trying to find this forever because I love Burt Goldblatt and I'd never heard the music. And I came upon this, cover, or this album, and I had to get it. And funnily enough, the vinyl, and I'm taking a second look at it right now. Yeah, I mean, it's actually not that bad. It plays pretty well. So I don't think I'm ever going to find another copy of this. The last time it sold on Discogs was in 2019. So, 3 or 4 years ago, depending on exactly when it sold. It just doesn't come up for sale. It's really tough. I think you can get like reissues. I think there's like a pretty good run of reissues that are out there available for anybody who wants to hear it. Or you can join me on the watch list on Discogs trying to find this dang thing with a better cover. So anyway, yeah, that's number 6. And again, $324.50. All right, number 5. This is also on Blue Note, and it is Jutta Hipp. So this is simply Jutta, I suppose. It just, it's in their New Faces, New Sounds series. They did a few of those. And this one, anyway, is New Faces, New Sounds from Germany. It was recorded in Frankfurt. 1954 is when this thing was put out. I would tell you who else is on this if I could pronounce their names. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But what else should I say about this? Well, this is kind of funny. So if you look at the back, you'll see a 75-cent price tag crossed out with 50 cents. I'm sure that anybody would be happy these days to spend 50 cents on this record because the average median value, or excuse me, that's incorrect. The median value on Discogs is $325 for this one. All right, number 4. This brings us more Jubilee and more Burt Goldblatt. So this is Monica Lewis, Fools Rush In, again with a characteristic Burt Goldblatt cover, which I really, really enjoy. This is from 1955. There's only one musician that is credited on here, and that is Jack Kelly, the primary sort of piano accompanist here. Fantastic music. Jubilee had a habit of highlighting some of these vocalists that, I don't know, I suppose they were trying to make stars. Not everybody made it. And yeah, I mean, Monica Lewis perhaps does not have a lot of name recognition these days, but certainly is captured very well here. I would say that I think personally the reason for some of these, what I would call lesser known singers' popularity these days, including Monica Lewis, including Betty St. Clair, is the Japanese market. So it feels to me like, and this is based on the number of reissues that came out of Japan for some of these artists, whereas in the US there'd be like nothing. You'd never hear about these records ever again. And yet there seemed to be this sort of steady stream that would highlight some of these otherwise lesser known singers. And so, it kind of feels like to me that market has in some way propped up some of the Jubilee titles in particular. And I think that this is one. So Monica Lewis, number 4, the median value on this one is $364.99. All right, stick with me. So there's 3 left. These next 2 are going to be perhaps obvious choices, but you probably won't see number 1 coming. So this next one, number 3, is the Clifford Brown Quartet. So this is on Blue Note. You've got this lovely sort of picnic table background cover image here, but fantastic music here. This was actually recorded in Paris, so it is not with a sort of roster of US artists that you might expect him to be performing with at this time period. This is from 1954. Obviously a very desirable title on Blue Note, and the median Discogs value on this one is $412.49. All right, number 2, also on Blue Note, we have Wade, and if Wade pronounces his last name as the French would, it would be Legge, so Wade Legge, I suppose. And this is part of the New Faces, New Sounds series as well, put out in 1953. He's joined by Lou Hackney on bass and Al Jones on drums. Another fantastic cover, as Blue Note tended to do. This cover design is actually by an interesting designer, though, and that is John Hermansader. John Hermansader. I do believe that Reed Miles was essentially a protege of Mr. Hermansader. And that's how Reed Miles ended up getting the job, because I think he was supporting this designer's efforts early on. So this record, catalog number 5031 for Blue Note, the median Discogs value on this thing is $450. All right, this is the last one. Number 1, and I mentioned that you probably won't recognize it, and I stand by that. I'm not, here's the thing, I'm sure that there's a lot of aficionados out there who will say, oh, I know that one. But I think, generally speaking, this is not that well known. One of the reasons why is because it's from 1961, but it came out on 10-inch. Ridiculous. So the label here is called Spirit Jazz. This is a French label, and the artist is Jeff Gilson. This is the Jeff Gilson Septet. So there's actually 2 formats here, depending on whether you're talking about side 1 or side 2. I confess, I don't know any of the other musicians on side 1 with Mr. Gilson. On side 2, I do recognize some of the folks, and those include Bobby Jaspar, Walter Davis Jr., Doug Watkins, and Art Taylor. So you've got some US musicians there. That particular side, that side 2, is from October 1958. Side 1 is from December 1961, both recorded in Paris. So yeah, it's pretty rare. Obviously, you can see my cover has issues, and those issues are tape on all sides. But, what are you going to do? It's a rare record. I came across this, I think, sometime during the pandemic, and I really didn't spend that much. And it didn't even occur to me. I think somebody else was listening to Jeff Gilson, and they're like, oh, you should get more of his stuff. And so I just kind of started following some of his records on Discogs. This one popped up, and it wasn't that expensive. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll just give that a go. And I remember this coming in and not even realizing it was going to be in 10-inch format. So I'm really not that familiar. His stuff is challenging. It's challenging stuff. I would say that by and large, his discography is probably not for me. But I'm always interested in sort of expanding my, horizons with music. And so I probably need to give this a go. I may not have listened to this in a year or more, maybe 2 years. So anyway, this is number 1 on the list, and the median value on this one is $465.12. So I think a quite unusual title to occupy that number 1 spot. So I guess a couple of things in closing. I would have expected there to be more representation from Blue Note, Prestige, and maybe to a lesser extent, New Jazz. I'm also kind of disappointed that there isn't any representation from Bethlehem, because I love that label. I've said that before. But also there's a couple of titles in particular that are just really hard to find. Just impossible. And so anyway, it's kind of interesting to me that in the case of Bethlehem, scarcity does not necessarily result in, I would say, extremely high value. Don't get me wrong, those titles that I'm thinking of are still, north of $100. But they're not in this sort of, $250 range that kind of opened this list of top 12. So anyway, some interesting titles on here, especially with the presence of Jubilee, I think 3 times. The fact that we had Betty St. Clair several times. I don't know that there was no, Mercury or Clef or Norgren on here is perhaps interesting. I would have expected maybe there to be, what would it be? I don't know, like a Billie Holiday title or a Bud Powell title from that era, but we don't have that. So maybe Lester Young, I don't know. So anyway, it's kind of surprising to me to see, I guess, the ones that that have increased in value. And in some of these trends, we have female vocalists from Billie Holiday to Monica Lewis to Betty St. Clair, as I already mentioned. Obviously, we're going to have presence from Blue Note, but not even necessarily the Blue Note titles that I would have expected. I mean, Wade Legge and Clifford Brown and Cool Britons are unusual to be up there when you consider that there could have been Monk, there could have been Miles, that Kenny Drew one, right? Or I'm trying to think, like, isn't there there's a Julius Watkins one that's particularly rare, or Lou Mecca or Gil Millet, right? There's these guys that put out great stuff, and some of those albums I think eclipse the ones that are more valuable. And they didn't appear on the list. And then you have just ones out of nowhere, like that Wardell Gray and Sonny Criss Hollywood Jazz Session one. I have no idea why that, how that appeared on here. So anyway, kind of a mix of titles perhaps you'd expect, but I think more than not, titles that you wouldn't expect to be on this list. So anyway, if anything, hopefully this is a little bit of an advertisement for you to expand your horizons in the 10-inch space. I will make every attempt to make additional videos in the future that highlight some 10-inch stuff, maybe a little bit less on value and maybe a little bit more on music, because, kind of like to cover both. So look out for that in the future. Thanks for sticking with me on this thing. And again, hit subscribe, just do it. And I'll see you next time.